Hey, how's it going, everyone? And welcome to Into the Westworld. This is our Westworld after show, recap show, breakdown show. We talk about the latest episode of HBO's hit series, Westworld. As I'm sure you can imagine, I am your host, Griffin Schiller, and I'm joined today by my good friend, Miss Gretchen Smale, who is a staff writer over at Bustle. Gretchen, say hello to everyone.
Hi, thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah, of course. Now, I was really excited to have you back on this one because I know, like, when we first talked about this and I had you on for the first episode, you're like, oh yeah, season one's great, or I'm sorry, episode one is great, but episode four is like my favorite. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is halfway through the season. Obviously, some crazy stuff's got to be going on. So I'm really excited to talk about it with you. So if you are new to the show, basically what happens is we break down the latest episode of Westworld. We kind of go through it by characters. So we talk about like Bernard and Stubbs team up, and we'll talk about their arc, and then like go to the next set of characters and and so forth. And so we go through the episode. But before we do that, be sure to leave us your thoughts and opinions on episode number 4, which is called The Mother of Exile, I believe. Let us know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below of wherever you're watching this. Yeah, before we dive too deep into this, Gretchen, let me just get your overall thoughts on this episode. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's a midway point for this season. So I love that you finally get a lot of really clear information about what's going on. It's not like season 2 at all, where you felt like you being led around. This was very straightforward, and I did love that. I love the cameo by Hiroyuki Sanada. I love the Wicked Games violin cover during that. It was amazing. It was
so
perfect.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, so I loved all that. But you know what? When it comes to the twist with Dolores, I don't know that I love the twist itself.
Yeah.
But I love the episode.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of been the big point of contention, I think, for most people that I've seen, sort of like the reactions online. Some people are like, oh, that's just stupid. And then other people are just like, well, that's kind of a cop-out and whatnot. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I guessed this partially. I partially guessed this. If you've been watching the recap shows, then you know. My big thing has been, oh, Hale is like actually the Dolores personality, and the Wyatt personality is like inside of Dolores, and so like while that wasn't entirely the case, Dolores did sort of like split up her personalities into these different pearls, and so I was kind of happy that was I was kind of on the right track. So that was cool. Whether or not I like it, I don't know. To me, it's in line with Dolores' character. Like, of course, she's never going to trust anyone else to do her job, which I think is like a line that she even says in the episode. So, yeah, I just, we'll see where it goes. It's like, it's one thing to reveal it, but if you can like explore it in a way that's interesting and makes sense, then I'll be able to appreciate it a little bit more. But yeah, overall, I think this is like similar to you. I absolutely love this episode. I think it's probably my favorite of the season so far. And listen, I loved last week's episode. I thought last week's episode was a little bit more of like the it was a little more thought-provoking. He was kind of dealing with like the emotions of like someone being in someone else's body, and I really enjoyed the commentary on that. But this to me was just like peak Westworld. This is the show doing what it does best, like functioning on all levels and just all the storylines converging. So yeah, this one was a lot of fun. Absolutely loved it. So let's dive into this thing. Let's start talking about it. What makes the most sense to start with for you? Do you want to start with William or?
Yeah, let's start with William, just because he kind of bookends the whole thing, and this is the first time we've seen him this season. So
yeah, for sure. Yes.
There's his character.
Yeah, I know. Well, we were talking a little bit about this like before we started recording, but you were just like, God, I hate him. I hope he dies, and I'm like, yes. Yeah. I hope he dies too, but man, I really just want to see him get tormented, and we got exactly that. The episode starts out, he's basically in a prison of his own sins. He's being haunted by the ghost of his daughter. He doesn't trust or believe anything around him, and it's basically just like that entire thing for the opening of the episode, until Hale comes in and is like, hey, we got to get you back into the board so that we can vote to go private and keep Serac from taking over the company. So let me get your thoughts on this cold, or not cold open, but like the opening of the show, before we go into the title sequence.
Yeah, like you said, I hate him. I mean, he is a very tragic character, but he is a tragic character by his own design, you know? I mean, he is the reason that his wife and daughter are dead. And really, he's the one that kickstarts kind of the host's awakening, especially Dolores and Maeve, by just abusing them to death, you know, over and over.
Yeah.
And now you finally see all of that coming, you know, right on his shoulders. And I thought it was interesting because I think it really plays with the line between, is this actually happening? Is it all in his head?
Mm-hmm.
Is he now in a simulation? And it seems like he doesn't even know anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like the daughter's there. She has this obvious echo to her voice. She keeps appearing, disappearing. Later, Hale comes in and she's like, oh yeah, I've been listening to your conversations with her. So it's like, well, how are you listening? Is it because he's just like yelling in the house alone, or is he in a simulation too? So it just furthers that whole thing. And I almost felt myself, you know, feeling for him in that moment.
Yeah.
Because Harris is such a great actor, and it's just like you see him then from the perspective of this is like a grieving father almost. So yeah. I thought it was well done, and now I'm not entirely sure if what we were seeing was actually real.
Right. Well, yeah, I don't know either. I think, you know, maybe what happened was because, as we kind of just discussed, because the Dolores Pearl was in Hale, maybe she like, and because Dolores can hack into anything and is like very tech savvy, if you will. Maybe the version or the vision of Emily inside of his house or whatnot was like a projection or something. Like maybe she was like purposefully toying with him, knowing that she'd get a reaction out of him. But something that leads me to believe that that's not the case is that later on in the episode, Hale basically says, well, I really didn't need to do anything. You were in a prison of your own sins, and your sanity is just questioned by nature because you can't you can't deal with what you've done. And so, like, yes, while I'm screwing you out of the company, it's like I didn't have to do anything to do this. So I don't know. There's a few different ways of looking at it, but I loved this pre-title sequence, especially because I think it was just like, it was the perfect reintroduction to William. Perfectly leaves off from like where we saw him at the end of season 2, and even the epilogue of season 2, which I think kind of ties into the end of this episode.
Right. Yeah, and I think the one other hint you see that we have yet to get the answer to is in one of the trailers. It shows him in that white jacket, and it shows somebody inserting a grip, you know, the insight tech that was forced into Caleb's mouth in William's mouth. So then that becomes a question of, does he already have the grip in his mouth and we haven't seen it yet? In which case that could lead to how he's seeing these hallucinations, as in someone ghosted interacting with that, or that's just going to be further used to torture him some more. Right.
Well, at the end of the episode, we saw like Hale insert something into his neck, right? Was that the grip then, or?
So I think the grip is the thing that goes in your mouth, but I think as long as you have that on your person, you can then use those drugs that you see like Liam using, or you can have those glasses that we see people being tortured with. So once it's in there, there's like a variety of ways basically to just break someone down.
Yeah, for sure. That is interesting. I think because I initially wasn't really sure of what that was when Hale inserted that in his neck. I don't know whether she was like taking a sample of his blood for something in order to use for God knows what, or like you said, using the grip, and that would make sense why that vision of Dolores, I guess, came into play at the end of the episode. So I don't know. And we'll just cover William as a whole. I don't even want to go in this episode chronologically. I think it's just best to kind of just focus by characters. There's so many things that play in this episode, but basically his arc throughout the course of this episode is just like getting back to the board in order to prevent Serac from getting a hold of Project 16 and all the info, I guess, that was in that section of the park. Obviously, we find out that Hale is Dolores, and this is where she like kind of tricks William into like being insane, and then forces him into a psych ward. And then the end of the episode, we see William in the prison being tormented again by Dolores, which is just great because I like this man.
Deserves.
He deserves it, but it's just like he does not catch a break. It was like first it was Ford in season 2, and then it was Emily for a little bit here, and then we finally get Dolores. So yeah, it's great. And then you brought up something interesting, which was a parallel to season 1, the shaving sequence.
Yeah, you see a lot of hints throughout this episode that, again, the real world is basically Westworld, which is actually what Dolores says later in the episode. But you do see what they call her Halores, Charlotte Hale's Dolores. Dolores is Charlotte Hale. Oh my God, so confusing. Yeah, she is shaving William in the exact same mirror of how Dolores shaved William in Westworld. So it's just like you see these repetitions of things that already happened over and over again.
Yeah, for sure. But okay, so moving away from William, obviously we have the pre-title sequence with him, and then we get the opening title sequence, and then we move to Bernard, kind of. So it's like, I don't know if it's a flashback per se, or whether it's Bernard, recalling him. Like, I don't know exactly what it is, whether it's a dream or something, but the way that I knew it was a simulation was because they did the aspect ratio changed, and that's always been an indication as to whether or not they're in a simulation or not. But in this, I don't know if that's the case. I think it was just more of like a flashback to kind of explain what Dolores was doing with the pearls. Was that how you took it?
Yeah, I think I took it. I forgot. I should have written down the quote, but basically she does say, you taught me that we can be anybody we want to be.
Yeah.
And I think that was just basically the quote to foreground the entire episode and say, hey, she's about to reveal she's literally everybody she wants to be,
Yeah, exactly. That's definitely how I kind of like reinterpreted that, as the reveal sort of happened. So then from there we get to Bernard and Stubbs. They're now in the real world. They've gone to the mainland. Obviously they're after Liam, because they know that Dolores is after him, or whatever, that Dolores wants to like clone him.
They think that Liam is already going to be killed and changed, and they're like 5 steps behind Dolores as always.
I know, it's great. And so basically, from then on forth, Bernard and Stubbs are on basically a crash course into like running into Dolores, which we'll see later on in this episode. But something that's interesting is like Bernard now has a button that controls Stubbs. So I don't know if I don't know whether he repurposed the button that he had for himself, or whether or not that's like a new button or something. But we see this like button technology kind of like pop up throughout the course of this episode, because Serac has a button that he can use to control Maeve, and so like this concept of like an on and off switch for the hosts is new and interesting. Yet it's like it's different from what we saw Bernard using in the first episode. So
right, I don't know what is up with the button thing.
I know.
I don't know if it's going to end up being a red herring. It feels really convenient that all of a sudden everyone's able to literally just pause hosts. And assumedly, I'm assuming it also is like a kill switch too, but it's not explained how he was able to make that button.
Yeah.
I am confused at this point if I'm gonna get confused myself explaining this, but if when Bernard like buttons himself, if the other personality that comes out is still him, or if he still has some trace of Dolores in him, now that we know that Dolores is literally everywhere and she brought Bernard back,
Right.
I am still on the fence of like, is that button thing something that actually Dolores like incepted into his mind, and that's how he knows how to make that. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't get.
Well, that's an interesting thing because like you're right. Like, is part of Dolores in Bernard's mind because you're right. She did bring him back. I don't think that's true. But like at the same, because like why would he be after Dolores unless Dolores like sent him on a path, like whatever, like trying to get him off the scent or whatnot. But. Yeah, I don't know. That like just thinking about that is making my brain hurt. Like I'm so confused. I'm just like, what the fuck is going on with him?
Every time I watch an episode, I like purposely avoid thinking about Bernard because I just don't get it. It's like the one part of the story that it is just losing me every time I focus on it. So I'm just like, okay, you know what, Bernard, do your thing. I hope Stubbs is okay.
I know. It's just well, whatever. But anyway, so yes, they're headed to Liam. And then the other people headed to Liam are Dolores and Caleb. So they're basically, Dolores is trying to disguise Caleb in order to rob Liam of some of his finances. What exactly she's trying to do with Liam, I still am not 100% sure. But there's a great sequence where they kind of like go into the bank to rob it, and like Caleb's like finally getting introduced to Dolores's world and like what she does, and he's like super nervous about it, and it's just, I love seeing their dynamic kind of progress because Caleb was on the back burner for a lot of this episode. He was just kind of like riding shotgun to everything that was happening, and so just seeing him react, I'm curious how that's going to affect their dynamic going forward.
Right. Yeah. You really see that poor Caleb is like literally being dragged around by Dolores. Yeah. He has no control in the situation. And he obviously respects her, but I also think at this point he still has no idea she's a host. And I think that maybe we will see, I don't know if we'll see him like end up siding with Bernard and like Maeve. Like, I don't know, as of what we know of Caleb, if he would support, what Dolores is doing.
Yeah.
I don't know what she's trying to do. If she's trying to, kill or potentially hurt a lot of people, he might not be down for that. So I would be interested in seeing, like, where he draws the line morally.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think he's going to be kind of the middle guy stuck in this sort of like battle between two factions, where it's like, I know when we originally talked with episode 1, it was like, oh, he's going to be the person that kind of like brings the humanity out in Dolores and kind of like shows her that not everything is bad. But like after this episode, I'm not 100% convinced. I'm just very like, I don't know, but like at the same time, he still has to serve a purpose with or for like what's going on with Dolores. So like, I don't know, maybe it'll just take a little longer. I don't know. Yeah. It's all really interesting.
I hope he does not die because of all of this. It might be very sad.
No, it definitely would be. I like Aaron Paul in this role too much, and I think like Caleb has slowly become, or not even slowly, just quickly become one of my favorite characters of the show, just ever. Because he's such a genuine person, and you feel like he's been taken advantage of by the system. And like he's just to the point of desperation to where like he meets Dolores and she shows him like, this is your future unless you join me. So it's like seeing him kind of just like her dangling the carrot in front of him, it like I don't know, I just feel bad. I feel bad for him.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, he's this season's everyman character. Like, kind of, I guess, like last few seasons, those were like the technicians, or the engineers. And he's basically our stand-in for us, the people who are not the 1%, who would very much be taken advantage of in the system if we lived in that society. So, like we all feel for him.
Yeah, but it's also really interesting because like Dolores isn't much like Dolores is an interesting character because she's very much in the same position as Caleb, but like she's retaliating in like a completely different way. Like she's operating with like a revenge first mentality, whereas like Caleb's very much like empathetic. Like he wants to fix what's going on, but like he doesn't want to just like kill a bunch of people. So, yeah, seeing her and you know she's kind of hypocritical too, because it's like is she better than the people that she's criticizing? You know?
Right, right. And we can talk about this like later with like the Maeve section, but you do see that come out with Maeve where she was just like, I thought you were building a world for all of us, but you were really just doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
And then that really underscores how far off the map Dolores has gotten.
Well, exactly. Like she's in I think that kind of goes back to the whole point where she's put she's put pearls of herself in each of these individuals because she's doing this out of selfish reasons. She's very self-righteous in what she's trying to do, but like when you boil it down to it, she just wants to create a world where she is on top, where she flips the power dynamics, where like she's on top and everyone else is below her because of, you know, years of being abused and whatnot. And it's difficult because I really like, I don't know if you felt the same way in last week's episode, but like I kind of like I felt for her. Like I really got where she was coming from, and I was like, oh, okay. Like your heart is in the right place. You kind of operate a little outside the boundaries, but like when she was talking to Caleb, I saw where she was going, and now in this episode, I'm like, well, you're just full of shit.
Yeah, no, Dolores is just, it's difficult to always side with Dolores. I used to love her as a character, and then as she started becoming more and more violent, I was just like, okay, buddy, I don't know. But she definitely like goes back and forth between someone who you want to root for because she's essentially like the final girl in a horror story, or you know, sort of like, you know, she was like an abused, you know, or a rape victim, and she has finally, you know, gotten her revenge. But then you see her face off against someone like Maeve, and you see how like good intentions don't always lead to, you know, results that are good for everyone else. And she's kind of gotten to the point where she's mowing down her own kind for her own goal, and it's not even clear if her own goal is to actually uplift her own people, or if it's just going to be 5 million Dolores copies, you know, in new bodies.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's really interesting because in a lot of ways she's Westworld's Daenerys, you know, like, and it's funny because it's like Dolores, Daenerys, and they're both like, anyways, they kind of fill that same sort of mold where they start out like innocent with good intentions, and then they eventually become the villain of the whole series. I don't know if I see Dolores really becoming like the main villain of of the entire show, because I really like the ideological divide between her and Maeve, where they're just like two sides of the same coin. But like this episode really just makes me think that they're just going to kind of turn her into this just maniacal entity or whatever. I don't know. What do you think? Where do you kind of see like Dolores's like arc going from here?
Oh God. So I've seen this episode several times, and the first time I was like, she's definitely Dani. But upon watch, I saw other sides of her, like when she faces off against Stubbs. It's clear she doesn't want to hurt him, and she kind of tells him to stand down. He's like, I'm sorry, I can't. And then she fights him. She has, you know, feelings for other hosts, and then she also hesitates with Maeve too. And she doesn't apologize, but she basically says, "I do want to make a world for all of us, but I just can't let you be used by Serac against me." So I see those peaks of like maybe the old Dolores. So I'm hoping that those shine through. And I know that, like, I just read an interview that Lisa Joy did with the Hollywood Reporter, and she, of course, like gave a very vague answer about like what Dolores is planning, but she basically said like either you can view Dolores is copying herself as the ultimate act of hubris, or you can see it as her saying, well, I'm embarking on this dangerous journey, and I don't want anyone else to get hurt except for me. So that's the sides of the car. And I don't know if I agree with like that she's not hurting anyone else because she just stabbed Maeve and threw
I
stabs
know. Like,
but like,
interesting.
I can see where Dolores might think that she is doing the best thing in everyone's interest. But so what I see as happening is she copied herself several times. And then I think it is going to become a thing of like nature versus nurture. Like you kind of saw with like the Hale copy.
Yeah.
Where she felt like it was the real Charlotte fighting her. And then she was having a hard time deciding if she was really Dolores or if she was now Charlotte with her son.
Yeah.
And I think we might see that with the other copies. Like there was a moment where it seemed like the Musashi Dolores copy was going to cut out Maeve's pearl, but then he stopped because Serac's men were there. But it seemed like she could have just like cut Maeve's head off or something. You know, like it, like the hesitation was made me think, well, is like Musashi somehow in there too? And now that Dolores is feeling a sense of morality that original Dolores doesn't have. So maybe they'll turn on original Dolores. I'm not entirely sure.
That is interesting. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but like as we saw last episode with Hale, I feel like it is, you know, the more ties they have, the more ties the individual has to like other people and the real world, I think the more that personality would kind of start to seep in. And kind of as you mentioned last time we had you on, it'll either be like a hybrid of the two personalities, or like one will eventually kind of just like defeat the other. So yeah, that's definitely an interesting way of looking at it. But moving on here, so we get to this masquerade slash sex party, whatever you want to call it, which was like very reminiscent of the orgy from season 1, which I really liked. And sorry, I like the parallel, not the orgy. Sorry, let me just clarify that. Let me just clarify that for a second. And then you're right, and with the Wicked Games cover playing over it, that was so awesome, and how it just, I loved how the episode just kind of like ramped up as the song kind of just like ramped up a little bit, and then we get the confrontation between Bernard and Stubbs and Dolores and Caleb. Dolores and Stubbs fight each other. Caleb goes after Bernard, who's trying to get Liam out of the party because he thinks that Liam is a copy. It's not the real Liam, but then he figures out that, oh, wait, he is. What do I do now? And then the mystery with Bernard continues. But yeah, that entire sequence was just like, that was so much fun. It was really well staged, directed, and I mean, it just showed how effing powerful Dolores is. Like, we know how powerful she is, but just like, she's sitting there just kicking Stubbs' butt. Like, the third Hemsworth brother is really like wishing he had some of that godly energy of either Chris or Liam at that moment.
And everyone's just watching it happen too. I was just like, I'm sorry to this man, you know.
I know. It's just, it's really funny. And like we were talking about this last episode, but we were just kind of like, oh, Luke Hemsworth. Well, the other two have the looks. He has to be like the best actor out of the three. So you know, and I think that's probably definitely the case, especially after last week's episode and this week's episode. But I just like Stubbs just trying to get in there. Just oh that's cute. Trying to think you think you can take on Dolores. All right, that's very sweet of you. But then so then that happens, and the Dolores pearl that's inside I never can remember this guy's name. The British bodyguard that
McConnell's.
Yeah, McConnell, whatever the hell.
They call him the Condores, which I think is way worse and hard to remember, but that's what they call him on Reddit.
Yeah, anyways, so like then he comes out, and like points a gun at Bernard, and so now we're gonna figure out what's Dolores gonna do with Bernard at this point, and then Caleb went after Liam, so I assume that and then Dolores comes and finds Liam, and so now the big mystery is what's gonna happen to Bernard and what's gonna happen to Liam, and that kind of closes out the Dolores, Bernard, Stubbs, and Caleb arc. Did you have any final thoughts on that whole thing?
I don't know what she's planning to do with Liam. It's still not clear to me why she would need him if she already stole all his money. But I will say I really just like the segment of when she came into the party with Caleb and she saw all of them with their masks on, and she said something like, I thought your world was going to be so different from mine, but there's no difference at all. And I'm just like, this is perfect. This is amazing.
Yes, I'm so happy you brought that up, because I thought I wrote it down and I didn't, and that was like I swear to God, that was my favorite line of the episode. That's where I like got a massive smile on my face, and I'm like, okay, Westworld, what's gonna happen next? It was just great.
Great.
But okay, so moving away from them and moving into the final, I guess, pairing of the episode, and that would be Serac and Maeve, which is interesting because not a lot happens, yet like a lot happens, and we find this is like our first real look at Serac as a character, other than like his mustache twirling villain intro at the end of the second episode. So we basically catch back up with them. Serac has Maeve in this restaurant in Singapore, and Maeve's like, well, if you wanted to impress me, you would have taken me to Paris. And then this is where we find out that a nuke basically took out Paris, I think. I don't know if it was just Paris or if it was like Paris and another part of France. And so we see like flashbacks of that happening and him saying like, oh, well, if only I could take you there. And then based off of the tease for next week's episode, I think we're going to explore that whole thing a little bit more. Definitely explore Serac as a person. But and then we also find out that he has a brother, which I believe at the top of the episode we were kind of like speculating about the fact that or maybe I don't know if we mentioned it off camera or while we were recording, but basically the big theory out there is that Serac and Ford are brothers. Do you buy into that, or do you think that would be a little too lazy?
I think it would be a little too lazy. It just seems weird, like an extra tie to Ford that doesn't need to be there, when I already think it's believable enough that Serac is just this genius who then finds out there was another genius that existed who came up with better tech than him, and now he's trying to steal away that technology. Mm-hmm. It just seems corny. I mean, like, it's like people always reference the fact that the Nolan brothers, one has an American accent and one has a British accent, so they're like, of course they would put it in the show where one is Brit. And I'm just like, I don't know. That seems a little corny.
It does,
yeah. I'd rather they didn't do that.
Yeah, no, I definitely would too. I just I don't know. I feel like Ford has to tie in somewhere, and right now that's the only thing making the most sense. I don't know, maybe we find out that they were like childhood friends somewhere down the line, but I don't know. I think that'll basically happen in next week's episode. But basically through that conversation we figure out that he created Rehoboam in order to prevent humanity from destroying itself. Basically that humanity's worst enemy was themselves, and so if he gave them predetermined paths to follow, then they'd be less likely to destroy themselves. And so he's basically, I think it was that like the system wasn't like quite perfect, and he needed like the map of the human mind that Dolores has inside the park or whatever to perfect it, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I think he thought that he had figured out this perfect system that can predetermine how people's life paths will go, but then somehow I forgot a little bit what it was that Ford like what was that extra thing that he was like, oh, Ford has that I absolutely don't have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. It's not entirely clear to me that like they say in another episode that it's like, oh, he created a more complete map of the human mind, but
Yeah.
it's not clear. It's what Serac wants to then do with that.
Yeah.
If he wants to completely put humans under his control, if he wants to actually make hosts to take away all control from humans, it's not very clear.
Yeah, I was a little I was a little unclear on that too, but what kind of happens next is that we see how he can use the his power of being able to predetermine everyone's lives against people. He can use it to torture people in a way which I is really just like super sinister. Definitely positions him to be like I don't want to say he's the big bad of the season, because I still think that's like going to be Dolores, but like he's definitely next in line, I guess, if we were to like rank the people in order of how they're going to be villains in the season or something. I don't know, but it's really interesting. It's like that in particular, just a lot of this season is reminding me of Minority Report, probably because it's like the same stuff that Jonathan Nolan is obsessed with. But like, or even like Person of Interest for sure, which, he had a hand in creating. But that's that like sequence in particular, really gave me shades of that. But basically they go to this safe house, which is where like a divergence, I guess, occurred, where Dolores remade her allies using her personality and the different pearls and whatnot, and she needed 5 identities, and Maeve is out there hunting the 5 identities to basically find Dolores and whatnot. And so, before we move on to Maeve's mission, what did you think of that whole encounter with Serac and the torture sequence, and then him kind of like exercising his power over humanity?
Yeah, it was interesting that he tortured that man using those glasses, like the insight glasses, because it almost exactly mirrored what Dolores did to that investor in the first episode, where she used the glasses to torture him before killing him. It's just that the way they did it and the reasons they did it were very different. But it's just interesting to see they're basically like a mirroring of extremes. And at the end of the day, Dolores did kill this guy who was abusing his wife, who killed his last wife, and who was abusing his current one and stole his money. And then the other guy kills the guy to assumedly then put his family on a path of like ruin, is what he seemed to be implying. So very different outcomes. But it was just interesting that it shows you how they're both willing to do really terrible things potentially to people, which I think, again, like we were saying, is how everyone else, like Caleb and Maeve and all of them, get stuck in the middle of these two people who are just kind of like their morality's not really there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's definitely why they're the two biggest antagonists of the season. And I think that's the last time we see Serac. So what do you think is ultimately going to happen with him throughout the course of the season? Do you think that he's going to make it all the way to the next season, or do you think they're going to kill him off in this season, and then the final season is going to be like just taking down Dolores?
Oh gosh, I think he's not going to make it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Like they've managed to keep like William around, but that's because he was like a popular character from season 1. But with Serac, I don't know. I mean, like Vincent Cassel is an amazing actor.
Yeah, he was really good this episode too. Like it just reminds you of how great he is.
Yeah, he's amazing, but I don't know if like the writers assume that people would have an attachment to him.
Yeah.
And last season they killed off basically everyone.
Yeah.
I faith he'll be left around, especially if Dolores is really on this like upwards trajectory of being really bloodthirsty. I don't know. I mean, and I think it would be more fitting if the final villain of I guess we're assuming that is the next season, the last season.
I thought I read somewhere, or like I had someone tell me that because I know they originally planned out 5 seasons, but I think because it's not performing as well as like HBO had hoped, that they're gonna get like one final season, like a season 4, probably another 8-episode season, I would imagine.
Yeah. So like, if the next season is the last one, I think to avoid a terrible Game of Thrones Dany situation, it would be fitting if they made her Dolores the final villain of the season, and they did the entire season, because I think otherwise it's gonna feel like a cop out of that entire arc that she had, So
yeah, and I agree, and to your point of Game of Thrones, not to get off on too much of a tangent here, but like, literally all they had to do was make season 7 just like them dealing with the White Walkers, and season 8 them dealing with Daenerys. It's really just. Anyways, that's just a mini rant on
we
Game of
go
Thrones.
For days.
Good Lord. Anyways, so back to Maeve's journey. So Maeve is tracking down. They find out from the identity forger or whatever that Dolores had an encounter with this person called the Mortician. So the Maeve tracks down the Mortician. She finds out that she sold a new identity to Dolores, and she sold Dolores the blood of Laura Epson, which is the person that she's been undercover as. It's how she got in with Liam. That's how she kind of disguised herself there. And so after that happened, she also disclosed that Dolores asked her to smuggle out bodies, assuming, I don't know what's going to happen with that. Maybe she's building an army or something, or maybe these bodies are of... Yeah, I don't even... Well, I don't know. Who do you think those bodies are? Are they some of the hosts that we've already seen, or...
I thought that what she was doing was asking for bodies to put her other... You know what? Never mind. I was going to say to put the other pearls in, but then that would be useless.
Exactly.
Just, like, random. I don't know. I think that goes hand in hand with when Maeve eventually gets to that distillery, you see that all of the barrels are like the white goopy stuff that they use to make the hosts.
Yeah.
Which implies that maybe she is building an army.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was leaning towards as well, precisely because of that, the barrels with like the host liquid in them or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the goo. Yeah.
The goo.
Yeah, it wasn't clear to me why she would need. I think she was asking for like dead human bodies, but as far as I can understand, you can't put a pearl into a dead human body, so I wasn't, unless she was just like she wanted the body to then copy new random hosts into. Because she does tell Maeve eventually there is space for the rest of us, the other hosts, so maybe she has been slowly putting hosts into humans, and that's the other like maybe potentially big shocker, is they're already all out there.
That's a good point. Maybe okay, so maybe she's not operating out of selfish reasons. Maybe she just needs the main Dolores clones to like kind of carve out the path for the rest of the hosts to be free in the real world, operating under new identities. I don't know. That's interesting. But then the mortician takes her to what is it, the Yakuza or something like this? I guess they're a gang or whatnot that Dolores has kind of infiltrated through. I forget the character's name. What's his name?
Musashi.
Yes, that's right. Who was in the samurai world, right? The Shogun world.
The Akane no Mai episode.
Yes.
Fantastic episode.
Yeah, oh my god, I freaking love that episode. That is so, it's like that one and then the Ghost Nation one.
Yes. And actually that was something I was going to bring up later, but like I realized with the shorter season and with Dolores literally being in everyone, I miss those old episodes where you get to see different people's or different hosts, whatever, perspectives, rather than literally offshoots of Dolores's perspective. And And I didn't realize how much I missed that until I saw Musashi again. And I was so happy. And then I was so disappointed when it was Dolores.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because my other friends that I've had on the show, they one of them does like those episodes, but I think they seem to prefer it when they don't have the offshoots. Because I guess to most people, it kind of feels like filler. It feels like filler. To me, I think they're incredibly necessary in order to flesh out what's going on, and like they're just these excellent self-contained character stories that shows you a new perspective. I mean, that's why the Ghost Nation episode was like one of the best episodes in the series, in like the history of the series, especially with the cover of Heart-Shaped Box and everything. I think that was just, it was such a sweet episode. And you're right, with the shortened 8-episode series or season, we don't have the ability to do episodes like that. That being said, though, where the show is going right now, I don't even know if it would make sense to have one of them anyways. It feels like everything's kind of like building towards a head, and like the days of just like those offshoot episodes are kind of behind us, unfortunately. Right, but then it's revealed that Dolores is inside. Damn it, I keep forgetting his name. What's his name again? Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Actually, I was gonna say that when Maeve arrived, this is from Reddit, by the way. I do not speak Japanese, but like when Maeve arrives at the place where Musashi is, it's called Itai Doshin Distillery, and Itai Doshin in Buddhism is a term that means to be of the same mind, even though we are many in body, which is this extra layer that basically hinted before she even got there that Musashi was Dolores, and I thought that was so smart. That's so interesting.
Damn it, Lisa Joy and Jonathan Nolan, you son, gosh, I can't. They're always like 5 million steps ahead of us. They're too good at this. It's almost like they should make a career out of writing television. So anyways, so they have an encounter after Maeve finds out that it's Dolores, and she calls her on her shit, and then he stabs Maeve, and then Maeve is just left there with a puddle of blood kind of spilling out of her. Obviously, she's not dead. But what's going to happen? Is Serac going to come in there and save her? Is she going to find herself in the hands of someone else? We really don't know. And that's kind of where the episode leaves us. Obviously, the proper episode concludes with William. It's bookended by his character, but that's really it. So, Gretchen, any final thoughts on episode number 4 before we close out? Oh no, did I lose you? Damn. Oh, we were doing so good. We made it to the very end of this. Oh no. That's totally fine. Oh gosh. Well, anyways, guys, thank you for tuning in. I'll show you where you can find Gretchen. You can find Gretchen over on Twitter at Gretchen Smale. And obviously, if you have any theories on Westworld, or you have any comments regarding this episode, be sure to leave it down in the comments section below, guys. Sorry we couldn't close this out properly. We're kind of testing stuff out. We're doing it live. We're messing around, and so obviously there'll be mistakes. But if you guys did like this format, be sure to let me know your thoughts and opinions on that. Maybe we'll try and incorporate a live Q&A section into it going forward. But seriously, this has been a lot of fun. We dove into a lot of great topics here. This was by far my favorite episode of the season. So like I said, guys, go check out Gretchen on Twitter. She has been writing some amazing stuff over at Bustle, and hopefully we'll have her back on for another Westworld recap. But lastly, guys, be sure to like this video, share with your friends, and subscribe to the Film Speak channel for more episodes of Into the Westworld, more movie reviews, other content. I've got a lot of stuff planned, so hopefully you all embark on this journey with me. Then you can also like Film Speak on Facebook, follow us on Twitter simply by searching Film Speak. And lastly, if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can always give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. Where's my lower third? There it is. There it is. There's my lower third down there. Or maybe it is. I don't even know. But this, like I said, we're testing stuff out live. But anyways, guys, thanks for joining me, and we'll catch you next week. Take care.